Well, I attempted to make some twisters with brown rice flour. Now, brown rice flour is gluten-free. It has absolutely no gluten in it. So I thought, well, that's going to be a good treat for me, and it's not going to have the gluten. Well, boy, was I wrong. So what you have to do if you're using a gluten-free bread, especially brown rice flour, which is what I was attempting to use, even though it's gluten-free, it does not work well with yeast. The white flours work better with the yeast. Um, I guess that's because they have gluten. I'm not really sure why, but brown rice flour, which I was attempting to use, didn't work. So I put the yeast in, I put the warm water in, I let it rise, and then I put the flour in and I kneaded it and waited for it to rise. Well, 3 hours later, it hadn't even moved. And it was kind of grainy texture to it and it was falling apart. It wasn't like holding together, which of course is what the gluten does when you're using white flour. So I thought, oh gosh. So I researched it and yeah, I was right. It was basically the flour. Most recipes, if you're using, and if you want anything that rises, if you're using the fast rising yeast is basically what I had. And so I was using that and you know what, it didn't work. It didn't work. So I had to revert back to the white flour. Now the only good thing about the white flour is that I am using yeast. And so that's basically a probiotic. That's a live bacteria that's actually formed when the yeast starts to bubble up, right? So that's about the only thing good. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it rise and I'm going to deep fry in olive oil um, the uh, the bread. So it's basically just bread dough that puffs up in the frying pan or in the pot with the grease with the olive oil. The olive oil will heat up, and then the grease will heat up, and it will expand those molecules within that bread dough. And that's what I use. It's basically like a fried bread. And then you can sprinkle icing sugar on it, which I'm not going to because of my diet. And you could put brown sugar on it, you could put jam on it, you could put whatever you want on it. I remember my mother back in the day, she would make the bread dough and then she would put a dollop of raspberry jam in the middle, squeeze it together, and then deep fry it. And those turned out really good. So I might do that, but I doubt it. I doubt it. I'm just looking for a snack for the evenings, and so maybe two or three of them would be a big enough snack for me. Now, don't forget, I'm on OMAD, so I only eat one meal a day, right? So just be aware of that. I'm not going to overindulge at all at any. Okay, so the yeast has been put in here, and apparently this yeast is from this year. So it's 19 or 19, it's 2024. It's supposed to be good till 2024. Now this is the fast rising yeast. So I'm basically going to have to put my flour in, which is the very inflammatory white flour, which is not a good thing. And then I'm going to um, just kind of mix it up a little bit, make it into like a floury kind of dough. So the important thing is to have everything warm. And then what you do is you just kind of fold the dough into itself. Now I've kneaded it and I've basically kind of folded it up so that you get a big air pocket in there. And then I have floured a warm bowl, put a little bit of flour in it, and shake it off. And that's it. And then you just cover it with a towel. Let's use this one. And you put it in a warm place. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my stove on bake, and I'm going to put it on low. And I'm just going to set this on here. But I'm actually going to set it on top of a tray. If I can find the tray. So I've got the tray. I'm just going to basically put the tray down, and I am going to set my bread dough on top of that with the light on. So, and we're going to let it rise, and we're going to see if it works a little bit better than the brown rice flour. And indeed, the brown rice flour, It does not work good with yeast at all. And look that up. It's a gluten-free bread, and so brown rice flour, it's good for baking muffins, it's good for making cookies, it's good for using as a thickening agent, all those things, okay? However, the bread, if you do make bread with it, if you add yeast to it, and I think one of the recipes said that if you put a little bit of vinegar in and the yeast and a little bit more yeast, that the non-gluten bread or the non-gluten flour, the brown rice flour, it will raise. But you have to do all those added steps. And I don't have the time, the wherewithal, or the energy, or even the gumption to do it. I don't want to be bothered. So if I was making cookies, indeed, I would be using the brown rice flour, but I did waste almost 2 to 3 cups of it, and on my budget, you can't do that. You can't do that. And don't forget, I also used a package of yeast, and I should have researched it before. So make this as a warning to all you new cooks out there or new bakers out there, and you're testing all these new recipes. Research it, because gluten-free bread is not the greatest at rising. The bread is heavier and it's thicker, and you have to kind of make up for that with adding yeast and vinegar and things like that. So we've got it on the stove right now, and it's getting warm, and it's really good to make sure that everything you're using, the water, the dishes, warm up the pots, warm up the bowls. Like this bowl is what I mixed it in, and this bowl was warm, right? So I made sure that everything was warm, and I will show you when it has risen. It's going to be a couple hours. I'm going to let it rise as much as I can, and then we're going to deep fry it and have ourselves a snack. So I'll see you shortly. Be aware, non-gluten flour is not the greatest at making bread that needs to rise. So just be aware of that, and I'll see you shortly. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do now. I have got my bread has risen double what it was. So it was fairly low, and it has risen quite a bit. So next thing I'm going to do is I am going to take a little bit of grease. I don't have a lot of grease because I'm on a budget. So this is olive oil, and I am going to heat it up, and then I'm going to cut off little chunks of the dough, drop it in when the oil is hot, and it will expand, and I'll show you that as I go. So I've got some extra virgin olive oil, and apparently extra virgin olive oil is what you should be deep frying. So if you're frying anything, which I'm deep frying these, this is the best to use, and this is what I'm using. Then I've also got a tin pan, and I have these little filters. Now I don't even remember where I got them, but I'm going to use that to catch any of the oil when I take it out. I've also got my little ladle, so I'm going to put them in here to cool. Now, what I remember my mom doing is she had icing sugar. Now, I have no icing sugar because of the fact I'm very careful on my diet, so I have no icing sugar. But you can use anything. You could have it with jam. You could have it with brown sugar. You could have it with honey. I mean, when you use the icing sugar, the white icing sugar, and you would put your twisters into a bag, and a paper bag even, and you would put some icing sugar in, you would shake it up, and then take them out. And if you heat them up with that white icing sugar on, it'll turn to like honey. So you could use that, or you could use honey, or any type of sweetener of your own choice. Right now, I choose not to. I'm just going to be eating them plain as plain twisters. So that's it. I'm just waiting for the oil to heat up, and then we're going to deep fry some of them, and we're going to put them in one of the filters in the pan so that the oil can drip, and I won't be eating oil. So we'll get on with that shortly. Hang on. Okay, so the oil is bubbling. I'm going to take a sharp knife, and I'm just basically going to cut little chunks of the dough off and wrap it into itself and just kind of toss it in. And that's it. That's it. That's all, folks. That's all she wrote. And they will deep fry. And as they're deep frying, they will swell up. So, I don't know if you can see that. I don't know if you can see it. There you go. How's that? Might use a fork to flip them over so that they cook on both sides. Because of the fact I don't have a lot of oil, and as the oil gets hotter, they'll cook faster. Okay, so let's try because it's starting to boil now. I'll tell you, my mom made good twisters. They were good. They were very good. Okay, so let's see. We'll start to swell up. And they'll be as big as you make, as big as you cut off the dough. That's how big the twister will be. So we're just going to wait till a couple of these cook, and then I'll show you how it looks. Once the oil heats up, it's a very fast process. So you have to be very, very aware of that. And, you know, let's say you stretch it, then they'll swell up. They'll be longer when they swell up. Yeah, so. You see? So the more you stretch the dough when you're taking it out and you're dropping them into the pan, the better it'll be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a few twisters, and the rest of the bread dough I'm going to put into buns. I'm going to put that in the oven and make myself a couple of buns to go with my soup that I have. So there we go. You can make a few different meals in one. I mean, look, they look good. They look good. We'll give them a try in a few minutes. So that made almost 2 dozen twisters, so that's pretty good. And we'll just leave the grease to cool down. And I'll let the bread dough rise a little bit more, and then I'm going to make it into 2 buns and put it in the oven. So there we go. That was so easy. It was so easy to do. And then you just sprinkle them with icing sugar, or you can sprinkle them with brown sugar. You can have it with, you know, a little dollop of jam on them. Let's see if I can find one. So